Bovril. Now I'm going to have a chocolate. Although, I have just been finalising the designs for the Retropower branded coffee that Roundstone are going to be launching hopefully before Christmas, which will be available in our shop, along with these mugs. And also, I think I mentioned this last week, we've done a bit of a merchandise bundle, basically all of the merchandise items we do together with, I think it probably works out as about a 15% discount for buying them all as one lot. So if you go to our website, you'll be able to get that. Perfect Christmas present. Right, follow me, episode 113 of Retropower Uncut. Oh. Can you just turn the music down? Yeah. Right, where to start? The workshop is incredibly crowded, as it was last week. Nothing's changed really. We've moved a lot of things around, and it's a right old pain because when the workshop is this full, changing anything that's on the ramp for a different car means basically moving everything outside. So I'm going to start with the Manta actually, because it's right next to me. We showed, I think, the cast centres for the wheels on these arriving probably last week or the week before. This week they went away to be machined, so doing the drillings and counterbores for the bolts that actually hold the split rim components together, doing the wheel bolt detail and the centreboard detail. We've done a bit of a step centreboard so we can machine a little cap that pops in afterwards. And then those have now been handed over to the body shop guys who are going to paint them. And I just cannot wait to see those wheels come together on this car, because it's been sat on these temporary wheels for so long that we're just completely used to them now. It's almost like this is how it's supposed to look. And I know it's going to absolutely transform it, so I can't wait to see those on. Right, Morris. I've been doing quite a bit of work on that this week actually. Interior assembly work for the final time. We kind of temporarily put a few things together in there for when the owner visited, so he could sit in it and sort of see the first inkling of its final finish. But I still had to do some wiring, so I was wiring up the various switch packs in the centre console. So there's the electric window switch packs, and there's a bank of switches that do heated screen, etc. So doing the final wiring for the electric window switches, and just generally getting the layout of all the wiring that goes to the centre console in its final form, so I could get the centre console together, and that's now in for what hopefully will be the final time. Likewise, making up the little subloom for the warning light module. So we had a little warning light module machined from aluminium, and it's got just some little warning lights for low fuel, oil pressure, charge, low brake fluid. So that pod's now done, and that was the last bit then to get the whole of that column shroud assembly done, which is all custom parts. So the whole column shroud, 2 pieces, is 3D print, wrapped in leather. The top part is machined in aluminium. That's all in situ now. Only the mount for the top panel of the shroud is actually held in by the warning light module, and that itself bolts into a 3D printed clamp that goes around the column. So there's only really one visible fastener in the whole lot on the top of the warning light module. So that's that, and then I've been getting everything ready for the final bits of upholstery to be done, which is the door cards, the rear quarter cards, all the rear bulkhead panelling, and the armrests on the doors. And it was basically trying to work out the very final layout for the leather. We'd done some sketches before, and we knew roughly how it was going to be. That's why we had designed the door handles to be the shape they are. But it was just doing some final kind of fine line tape layouts to just see what worked and what didn't. But I'm happy we've cracked that now. So it's going to be a combination of the dark and light leather that features on the seats. All that lot's ready for Dean now. So on Tuesday, Dean's going to come over, pick all those bits up, take that lot away. He can crack on with leathering that, and he's got the Land Cruiser bits already. So suddenly he's got a lot of work on from us at the moment. And then Adam's just doing some finessing work on the bonnet latches. We noticed a bit of an issue with those in that where the pin on the latch goes into the kind of sliding receptacle. because there's nothing to locate it underneath, the bonnet can move around a bit and unlatch itself, which is obviously not what we want. So we're just doing a little circular guide underneath the latch part. So once it's gone all the way through the latch and latched, it's then held dead fixed so it can't move around. So he's on with that at the minute. So yeah, good progress on that. Kaiser, James has been working on all of the wiring. So we showed, I think, the dash fascia panels, the revised fascia panels turning up. There's a lot of wiring involved because we've relocated all the climate control panel down to the centre console now, and then the head unit's been changed for the one that's now got a nav screen on it. So there was quite a bit of wiring. Plus we've changed the switch layout completely on the dash, so it's all new switches on there, different layout, different position for the ignition switch. Had to do various wiring changes for that, and we're just going to make some little filters for what was the gear indicator display, which has got, you know, park, reverse, neutral, drive, and then 3, 2, 1. Very unusual to use the gear holds on a car that's just essentially being used for cruising around in. So rather than have the indicators for 2 and 1, and a separate warning light for brake fluid and for cruise control, we're making some little filters to go in the 2 and 1 position. So rather than saying 2 and 1, it's got the low brake fluid and cruise control warning lights in that same little panel. So it's a nice little feature that tidies up the dash a little bit more. So James is working on all the wiring on that. And then also there's a new piece of moulding. So there's a chrome strip that runs across the top of the dash. Originally part of that was made up by the ashtray, which is no longer there, and then there was a short piece that sat above the climate control controls. So now that's become one piece, so we've drawn that in CAD, 3D printed it, tested it, happy with it. That's going to now be machined in brass and chromed, and that kind of continues that strip across the top. So that's where we're at with that. The Cortina anti-roll bar's done, happy with that. Looks like it's going to be fine. Just waiting for a dry road to test drive it, which, as the way the weather's been lately, is going to be highly unlikely. It's literally thrown it down for about 5 or 6 days solid now, I think. Although it's not actually raining now, but the problem is at this time of year, it's then so cold it doesn't evaporate the water away. So a bit of a pain from a test driving point of view. And I suspect that's going to be a problem for this as well, which is I'm just trying to pin down a date to do some on-road mapping with this. What we have done on this is the drawing for the front louver panel. That's been finished now. That's been sent off to KS Composites. They're going to machine the tooling for that, and I think on this occasion they're actually going to make the panel as well. So that's in progress. And the wheel, we received a replacement wheel. I mentioned previously that one of the wheels on the back of this is defective. So we've got a replacement. The guys have just been prepping that for paint. That's actually going to be the same silver as these wheels, so it's probably be painted at the same time. So that's where we're at with that. E-Type, we received, I'm just trying to think whether we'd already received these back last week, but all the suspension components that we'd had Xylan coated, so like the front arms, the uprights, the torsion bars, all of that sort of stuff, we've had all of that lot black Xylan coated, and there's also a batch of zinc plating gone away for things like fasteners. We've received the brake upgrade kit from Fossway Performance, so it's an alloy 4-pot vented disc kit for that. So we've pretty much got together all of the components for the suspension rebuild to get it rolling. We're going to do the fuel system. That's something we've been working on. We've got a new fuel tank for it. We're going to do, because it's going to run on injection, we're going to do our own sort of in-tank injection pump. So we've got a new fuel tank, which conveniently, as standard, has quite a big aperture where the fuel pickup and sender unit go. So we're going to design our own piece that goes in, bolts into that original flange, but has a high pressure pump in it and a fuel return. And then we've been over to ATEC, I think they're in Brackley, to pick up the fuel lines, because we're going to do like formed aluminium hard line for the fuel lines. And the reason we're tackling that now actually is because the fuel line goes above the rear subframe, so we want to do that before we fit the rear subframe. So working on the fuel system for that, and then we've ordered the wheels from Torino. It's going to have some really nice stainless steel wire wheels on it, so they've been ordered. So hopefully all that will come together. Suspension on, rear subframe in after the fuel system's done, wheels on, and yeah, we'll see that rolling in essentially whenever the wheels are done. Speaking of wheels, the Mustang, it's been a little bit of a stagnation on the Mustang, which really was fueled by the fact that the wheels had been removed. We decided to refurbish and refinish the wheels with painted centres. But frustratingly, the tyre place we used when they were removing the tyres cracked one of the wheels quite badly, and we're not really happy with welding it up. I know it's something that can be done, but we're obviously working to a reasonable standard and don't really feel happy to put a welded up set of wheels on a customer's car. So we are now going back to a plan that we had discussed before, which was getting a similar set of wheels from Northants Tyres, but they're waiting for a delivery to come. I think it's due to dock in Southampton on the 28th, which is about a week from now. So we're kind of reverting to that plan, which we dismissed because of the wait time originally, but now we're kind of in this point now where we haven't got that many options. So when those wheels arrive, obviously we'll check the fit of them. I've already gone over the PCDs and offsets and the widths of them, and they should be perfect for it. But I want to get them in my hand before we order the tyres. We'll get them here, get the tyres on, and then be back straight onto test driving that. So the only hold up really is the issue with the wheels. Land Cruiser, machined bits arrived. So the cam covers, we've just had it sat on its original standard cam covers for ages, and you probably wondered, or may have wondered, why they were like, it was a sort of scruffy letdown in the engine bay, and that's because they're just temporary. We've already designed our own cam covers that hide away coil-on plug units inside and look quite vintage. So the top covers of those have now been machined by Alitech, and the remaining parts of the belt covers and all of those bits have now gone away to the anodizers to be vapor blasted and black anodized. And then the only remaining bit we're waiting for is the main cam cover section, which is just going to be machined by Alitech in the next week or so. So really excited to see all that come together, and the inlet manifold drawing's done now as well. So once that lot comes together, that's the engine installation complete. So that's that. What else? God, there's so many cars in here at the minute. Camaro, John's well on now with starting the plumbing work on that. So brake lines he's made up some stainless straps on the rear axle to hold mounting points for the brake line. He's done a bracket for where that sits over the top of the axle to put the T-piece on, planned out all the routing, which we'd put provision in the body shell for it all already, but we did that long ago because that project was on pause for a while. It's sort of refreshing our memory of what the plan was with all of that. But he's now able to start laying out all the brake lines. And fuel system as well, we've got a fuel tank through. It's a sort of injection conversion kit from Holly, new fuel tank with an in-tank pump in it, everything new straps, etc. So getting that on will be probably one of the next jobs, and starting to run the fuel lines through to the front. And we've been planning out the plumbing routing again, or refreshing our memories of it for the hydraulics, because it's actually got a hydraulic brake booster on that, so it runs off the same pump as the power steering system. So just basically getting the exact routing of all the plumbing for that planned out so we can order the necessary fittings, etc. So that should start to take shape pretty quickly over the next week. And the NSU, I think Adam finished getting the glass in. He'd just done one or two of the windows, bonding them into the channels that lift them last week. They're now fully bonded in, rear windows in. We are just waiting for some parts now, actually. We're just waiting for the top mounts and lower ball joints that the customer's sorting out, and then that's everything. John's put together the front struts now, so we're just literally waiting for those parts, and then that'll be rolling. We'll get the windscreen and sunroof in, and then I think that's basically the point at which the customer's going to take that back then. So it'll be nice. Not that long from now, we'll have probably 4 or 5 cars fewer in here, which will be a bit of a relief. And then finally, Utah. A few more jobs done on that. So we've fitted rear seat belts, which is something that the owner requested as an upgrade. James is just making a modification to the exhaust. We noticed that the paintwork and the overrider next to the exhaust was just getting a bit discoloured. We'd done the exhaust very flush with the bodywork originally, just for cosmetic reasons. But I think on the overrun you do get the odd little flame out the back of that car, and it's just starting to discolour the paint, so we're extending it by an inch so it just sticks out a little bit. And then there's a power steering fluid leak, which, having looked at it, is the rack leaking. Now, it was a freshly rebuilt rack when we built the car, so a bit disappointed with that failure, but nonetheless we're going to strip that apart and see what's up. Presumably a seal failure internally on the rack, because it's coming out around the rack gaiters. So we'll look into that and get that resolved. We've done a few other little tweaks inside. There was a little rattle in the passenger door. We've solved that. Just freed up the window winder slightly on the passenger side. It was a little bit heavy to wind, so It's just little things like that are the other jobs. The DAB antenna, we've tried 2 already now and never successfully got a DAB antenna in it that doesn't occasionally lose signal. So we're going to try a 3rd one on that, fingers crossed. But yeah, main thing really being steering rack leak, which we're resolving at the minute. So yeah, I think that's a lot of information. But Jamie's standing there filming this thinking, oh my goodness, I haven't got footage of like 70% of what you've just talked about. I'm going to hand over to Nat, who hopefully might do a more concise coverage of the metal workshop, but probably not. And I'll see you next week. Bye.
So hello and welcome to the fabrication workshop side of this week's Retropower Uncut, and we're going to start with a Ford Escort, as is the standard at the moment. We've been working on the rear end of the Escort chiefly. Tom's been doing some work on the dash. He's pretty much got that finished off now. But Sam, our new man, has been working on the rear end in here, getting the turrets installed, chassis rails cut out. He's just made up the end plates for the rear harness bar, which welds to the turrets and forms the front edge of the parcel shelf. So he's just got those plug welded in. He's going to grind them off next and then get that tube, all the holes bored in that tube, and get the threaded bosses welded into that. And then that tube can be put in, welded to the turrets, and we can carry on fabricating from there. So yeah, they've done some laser alignment to get the turret cutouts all vertical on the correct width and all lined up where they need to be. Use the CAD to sort of work out the reference points versus the uprights on the jig. Done the measurement from there, scribed it all out, cut it all out, got all that in and all welded in. And they've also, Sam's also finished off welding in the filler strips which go between the raised section of floor that goes over the rear suspension cradle and the inner wheel arch tubs. There's a strip each side. On the other car we left the original floor there. On this one the floor wasn't perfect, and to be totally honest, we forgot we meant to leave the floor there and cut it out. So we've replaced it anyway. It's probably for the better for replacing it. It was a little bit pitted and whatever, so it's done no harm replacing it, but yeah, we accidentally cut a bit more floor out than we intended to there. So yeah, that pretty much gets us to where we're at in the rear. So the next stages will be the rear bulkhead and the rear parcel shelf going in. Again, we've done them before, we've got the CAD, it should be pretty close. Sorry, I'm actually stepping ahead. No, the next stage will be the raised floor section. Again, we've got quite a few of the bits made for that, so that'll be going in, and then the bulkhead and the parcel shelf section and the various reinforcers. And we've got all the bits either drawn or already made for that. Mainly just drawn, not all already made for that. So that should all be good. And then, as I say, Tom's been on with the dashboard, getting that progressed. He'd already done quite a chunk of work on that. He's now got it to the stage where he's just making the end sections, which I literally saw about 5 minutes ago, and he's now moved to somewhere else, so I can't say, here we are. I'll wave one of those at the camera because they're quite special. He's just making these up at the moment, which are the finisher sections for the ends of the dash. That will be the far side. That goes on the driver's side. Now obviously the return on the dash will blend into that radius there, and then that finishes against the inside of the A-pillar and just cleans up and finishes off the end of the dash. Obviously that's got quite an angle, so I'm kind of holding it wrong. It's more like that. But yeah, that's a very nice little bit of metal shaping that Tom's working on at the moment, getting that done. I think that pretty much gets us to where we're at on Project Kuma, Mark 1 Escort. We'll go around here. I might have to get Gaz to stop filing for a minute because it'll be quite loud on my mic, I think. But here we have a new one in the workshop. It's actually not a new car to us. We actually blasted this car. We Glass Grip blasted this car about 10 years ago, maybe 9 years ago. We blasted the body shell on this, and the owner, Alan, he was getting the metalwork done with his friend Gary. Both of whom we know, and we'd class as friends. They're both really nice guys. They've been cracking on with the metalwork. They've got it done. Alan's had various ups and downs and things gone on, and it's a hobby, not a profession to him. And lots of other things have happened in life as well. So it had taken a little while, but he'd got it to the stage of wanting to get it painted. And he actually got in touch with us asking if we were still interested in painting it. Which we said yes we were, A, because we knew the car and knew it was a very nice car, and B, it actually timed quite well with a slight lull on our paintwork load. So it actually the stars lined up a little bit with it, really. So yeah, 69 Dodge Charger, for anybody that doesn't recognise it, although it is pretty recognisable as cars go. About a mile of American metal. So we got that in last weekend on Saturday. Earlier this week we pulled it round, got the front and rear axle assemblies dropped off, got it on a little trolley, got it into the body prep. We wanted to DA off the new panel work and the roof, so all the rear end outer panel work was new. We didn't want to really blast that, and we do want to do some metal finishing on it. There's a couple of little ripples, nothing much, a few little bits to finesse a little bit. And we want to check all the shuts in bare metal and be able to just check all that, and we need to do some lead work on it. And we tend to try and do the lead work before blasting, that way we can clean up around the lead with the blaster, and also then the lead's already there before I do the zinc metal spraying. So the guys have got all the outer sort of I'd call it eco. I don't think it is, but the transport primer has been removed from those panels. That's all been cleaned off. Then we've got it back on we put it on the rotisserie on this morning. Well, as of yesterday afternoon, it went on the rotisserie here. We made some rotisserie ends for it, which are pretty sturdy on this because it's a pretty heavy car. Got it on the rotisserie here end of yesterday. It's been on that this morning. Got the bracketry finished off underneath. There was a couple of little welds to finish off, a few little tiny bits to tidy up. To be honest, not very much. It was a credit to the guys doing the metal work. To be fair, it's really good. Got that bit finished off, then we've got it back. I've knocked up a bit of a trolley that puts the support in line with the axle centre lines, just so we don't kid ourselves with any panel gaps. We've got it on the trolley now, so we've got it the right way up and it's all stable to work on, and we can have a couple of people working on it at once. And Gaz is getting on with the lead work now. He's just lead loading we call it a C-pillar, obviously it's pillarless. I don't know whether you'd call it a B-pillar or a C-pillar. I'll call it a C-pillar. He's lead loading the sail panel, as the Americans would call it. So he's lead loading the sail panel that side. Next job, lead load sail panel this side. Get the rear screen, get this rake section all correct. There's a little bit of a dip there. Get all that straight and correct, get those done. We've got a bit of a repair to do on the bottom of the gutter here. A couple of extraneous holes in the bulkhead to weld up, which Tom's going to get on with it very shortly, get TIG welding those up. And then it will be re-panel it all up again and check all the panel alignments. We've got a bit of work to do on a couple of the panels. The bonnet has got a couple of tiny pinholes in and quite a bit of surface corrosion from the past that's been cleaned off. Often we would say we would want to change the bonnet. In the case of this one, it is, although it's a little bit damaged here and there, it is the original bonnet. And given that it's original and it's very heavy duty metal and it's in generally reasonable condition, we're going to try and use it. And the same with the trunk lid. There's quite heavy damage on one side, one part of the rear edge of the trunk lid. However, a new one isn't particularly cheap. Getting it here will take some time, and there's no saying that, given that the quarters were gapped to the original, if slightly damaged, trunk lid, and the damage wasn't on the sides of that, I hasten to add, we'd rather use the original, even if it means that we need to do a bit of repair work on it. It'll still probably be cheaper than replacing the panel, and it will certainly be better quality than replacing the panel, and it certainly will fit the quarters better than anything else. So we're going to certainly the current plan, unless something changes, is to repair the trunk lid. So you'll probably see that, you should see that on the next episode, because we'll be cracking on with that and getting the bonnet done. We'll be doing some lead work on the bonnet to smooth out the pitting work. We're going to lead that up to sort that out, and we'll be doing some lead work on the back of the trunk lid as well, just sorting that out. We've got to do some lead work and a bit of tweaking around these back corners where the cast zinc finishers go around here. We've got to do a bit of work where the bumper goes. We're going to just fit up a lot of the chrome work and just check that's good. We've got to put the chrome alignment, the pins that hold the clips in place that hold the rear window finisher chrome on the rear window. We've got to get those in. We're going to make a little drill jig, set the hole positions for them. We've got a bit of finishing work to do for the clip attachment holes on the front windscreen as well. So there's quite a lot of fiddly work around making trims fit and checking the trims fit and that side of things. But yeah, we're really looking forward to this. It's a hell of a car. It's going to be a very, very nice car this once it's done. So yeah, it's a nice one to sort of add into the mix, unexpectedly add into the mix. So yeah, that's one to keep an eye on. And then coming round to the Churchill Jaguar, Stu's been carrying on with the bits that I mentioned last week. he's been on with what I tend to always refer to as the fireplace, because it kind of always ends up looking a bit like an open fireplace until you close it off with the tunnel top. But that transition from a sort of squarish structure from the bulkhead down to the floor to a round structure around the transmission always ends up, obviously there's a kind of square to round bit of work here, but the top part of it I always think looks a bit like a sort of a fireplace. It's what it is in my head. But yeah, he's got that sort of square to round transition done the tunnel section there, and then he's done the bit of work up in the top here, which I think we touched on last week, that it was quite tricky to do, and he's done that transition section at the very top above the transmission, above the bell housing, where the HVAC pipe work, the 2 pipes for the air conditioning and the 2 pipes for the hot water for the heater come through over that side. And as I say, he's had to put a clearance section in because the bracket work and the back of the HVAC unit interfere with the bulkhead there, but he didn't want to lose space lower down because of the exhaust. So he's actually made a little recess in there and done some tank rolling and some shaping to enable the recess to go through the bulkhead to allow access to that bolt, but still keep as much space as possible on the far side of the bulkhead. So a lovely job there, quite an awkward piece to make. All of that bulkhead section is a really awkward area. We seem to have been on it a long time. I imagine people watching every week will have noticed that there's been quite a lot of hours of work in that bulkhead, and that's because it's a pretty tricky bit to do. We were talking about it earlier, and there are ways of attacking it. We could have scanned all the running gear, so we've got an image of this, we've got an appreciation of the space available in CAD, and then drawn all the bulkhead section. The problem there is there are quite a lot of limitations on what shape we can put in. And unless you can directly generate the shapes using something semi-automated from the CAD, then you're not really any further forward, because you're then just shaping bits of metal to CAD, which if you have to then make books for them, it's taken longer than making the stuff just freeform by hand. And somebody with sort of Stu's level of skill can kind of mentally scan the space he's got available, work out the lines he needs to feed forces through, and that's all appropriate to the area. So obviously on that side he's got steering column forces and pedal control forces to feed into the bulkhead. This side he hasn't got those to feed in, but he also needs to brace the tube work that carries the bulkhead and help triangulate the support for the front chassis rails, make sure that there's support in the monocoque for that. So there's an element of kind of designing on the fly and working out on the fly of how to feed all those forces into things, how to make it look right, because usually these things need to look right. Usually if it works, it does look right as well. So making it look neat and make it neatly manufacturable as well, so that the flanges just look tidy when it's finished. It kind of has a look of something that an original equipment manufacturer would make. So not just corner to corner welding things and chopping through the floor pan and welding straight in a corner to it, but putting flanges on, plug welding, spot welding, generally making it so that it has that sort of OEM approach to the construction. So there's a lot of time involved in that. But he's definitely light at the end of the tunnel, if you'll pardon the pun, and I hadn't planned that one. But yeah, he's certainly getting towards the end of it now. And this sort of bit is relatively easy compared to all the stuff further up, where there's so many obstructions and such complicated details to making that. But yeah, we're well on with that and progressing really nicely with that. So great to see it all coming together. We're not too far away from this sort of internal metalwork on that now. And lastly, sort of along this side, we've got the Project 1 Escort, which is at that sort of time-consuming, fiddly, towards the end of things metalwork stage. Bobby's been on with the steering column. I think last week I talked about doing the initial fabrication and a bit of machining work on the column. I made the inner column section, welded that together in the lathe, made the outer column section, welded that to the mounting plate to mount it to the motor. So the upper column, in terms of the outer and inner, was all assembled at the correct length, mounted to the motor, and then I'd kind of I had a quick play around with offering the motor up, worked out what cutout needed doing in the dash, made that cutout with a hole saw. I think I talked about doing that, cut through the dash, got it to sort of loosely in the right ballpark, and handed that job to Bobby and ran away fast. So he's been cracking on with that now, because it's quite awkward. Again, neatly getting structure in that's suitable to take the loading. And the loading's pretty high on a steering column, and it's got to be done right. So he's got the structure in place now to do that. It's absolutely absolutely solid, that column. I mean, I'm not going to be able to demonstrate it very well here, but there is absolutely zero flex in that. Considering how far back the wheel is, that's no mean feat, but there's absolutely zero flex in that, and not too much weight either in the structure. So that's now tied through with like a boxed tube structure that goes from the forward edge of the assist motor down to the pedal box, and that actually bolts to the pedal box fabrication, and obviously the pedal box is bolted to the bulkhead, and then the steering column is also then bolted into the dash tube at the top, as we talked about before. And the net result of that is that the two tie each other together and tie into the dash. So the pedal box loads are spread via the steering column structure into the dash, and the steering column loads are spread via the pedal box structure into the bulkhead. The net result is both of them cancel each other's flex out, and neither flexes very much at all, which is really good. I've put quite a lot of force this morning through my big boot on the back of the structure around the master cylinders, just to see, because one thing I absolutely hate with a passion is flex in controls. That spongy feeling you get when controls in a car flex. You want everything to be completely solid and rigid and mechanical feeling and nice. And that's how it is on this. There's no flex, it's all absolutely solid, it's really good. So really, really happy with the result on that. I think we'd covered, Bobby doing the handbrake last week, we'd done that. And then Scott's been on with some really fiddly, really time-consuming bits on the front. I feel a bit sorry for Scott, really, this week, because I don't say that very often either, but he's been dealing with the tail end of the alternator, the brackets that Sherwood Engines supply for the alternator doesn't quite put the alternator where we need it to be. It needs to be just a fraction further in. But just a fraction further in ends up being a massive ball ache of a job, because then lots of other things interfere and whole knock-on effect. But anyway, he's modified that bracket as far as we need to modify it for now. There'll be some final touches probably required when we actually have the final engine in. But for the stage we're at now, we know we can get it to clear. We've got quite a lot of clearance, we've got plenty of adjustment for the belt, and we've got clearance on the dry sump setup, so everything fits nicely, really happy with that. So we've parked that job for now at this stage. And then the other section Scott's been on with, which we know from previous experience was a bit of a pain, is the anti-roll bar. We're using a compression strut anti-roll bar kit. I think it's Rick's engineering kit, which is pretty standard on an Escort running this what would be called the Rick's WRC Escort front suspension, which you can see there. In fact, that's quite a good time to show it on camera. The difference, though, with the setup we're running is that the kit is really designed to run with a Bilstein upright, a Bilstein damper based upright, and this is actually running nitron struts, and for one reason or another the bottom of the strut actually interferes with various things, because there's some more damper protruding from the bottom of the strut casing than there would be with the Bilstein version, and consequently that then interferes with the anti-roll bar when we're on lock. So we, on a previous car, the previous one of these that we built that you may have noticed somewhere in the media, we made these little machined drop link adapters to just offset the anti-roll bar a little bit from the strut casing. I said to Scott on this one that we might as well just articulate those rose joints a little bit further, and while we've got the option to do it, move the roll bar a bit further forward, on the grounds that would give us a bit more of a fighting chance of having clearance, and we now run out of clearance on the steering arm and the strut at the same time, and basically through the entire travel and from lock to lock we don't run out of clearance. But if we did in either direction, we can shim very easily now in either direction to ensure that we don't run out of travel. It is all quite tight around there, so it's understandable that there could be an issue. The chief problem will be if we need to move our caster angle by adjusting the compression strut, then it'll change the relationship obviously of the drop link to the steering arm and the strut casing, but at that point we can run shims behind either of these spherical joints, which will then give us, or it will increase or subtract clearance in both of those points to allow everything to function around there. So that's what Scott's been on with, say fiddly, non-glamorous work that all has to be done to get the car to the finish line. So but that's progressing quite well. George in the background has been on with the bits for the scuttle panel. I think we mentioned before, they're pretty much, I think they are now ready to go. in plastic form, not final machine form. Now they're in plastic form. I think one of Scott's next tasks will be to make the press tools to press the trays that are going in the front panel to hold the bonnet catch assembly and the bonnet safety catch assembly that we've engineered from scratch now in the end. They'll all be made in stainless steel. And then so Scott can make the trays that are going to receive those, press them out, make sure the pressings are good, and once he's got them pressed out, we'll then cut them and let them into this scuttle assembly. So that will be nice to see, because it's going to look really tidy, like really different to a normal Escort, and really nice and tidy. So that's where we're at on that. And then picking up, mentioning George at that point, George has also been on with, I can't really point it out because it's actually in the paint booth and it's all covered up, but George has also been on with the bonnet for this E-Type. He's been, I don't know if Cal's already mentioned it, I don't think he has. George has been doing a bit of, he's done a scan. You'll see Gaz and the body shop guys have finished doing all the hand sculpting of the filler of the buck for the bonnet, which we covered plenty on previous episodes. They've got that by eye pretty close, by feel pretty close, you know, in the realm. They've done a coat of spray polyester surfacer on it, given that a rough block, but it's now at that stage where it needs some fine tuning. But to double check so that we weren't fine tuning in the wrong direction, we've got George to do another scan of that front end, and he's put that back in and superimposed it into his original CAD model of the drawing that he did of the revised front end, overlaid the two so that we can get an idea of where it was plus or minus in terms of surface height compared to that. And then he's also tested it for symmetry of one versus the other. The Peel software has some really nifty, the Peel to CAD software has some really nifty features in it, one of which is the centerline split, where it basically creates I believe it would be done on a volumetric basis, though I'm not completely sure how it works, magic in my head, but basically it creates the centerline down a scanned structure. So if we scan that bonnet, the software itself will put the centerline down it for you. So he's used the center lines from that to check it, and he's then done a symmetry check, and it's actually all extremely close. I think the worst points were out by about 5mm, which, considering originally I think the entire structure was out by more like 14mm, to have changed the shape and improved on the symmetry is actually pretty good. I think there's a few bits of fine tuning to do on that, a bit more sanding and a bit more tickling and fettling, but that's actually really very close to being ready to go for taking a mould from it now. There's some more complications in terms of internal structure and various other things, but in the similar fashion to what we're doing with the Jensen, the plan I think is to do the outer section first, get that as far as a final part, and then we can look at making the internal structures to bond into it, because the outside obviously has to be the right shape to start with, irrelevant of what goes inside it. You don't want the internal parts to start pushing the external shape around. So that's where we're at with that one. And then last but not least, the body shop's really been a mixture of various things. I'll open the door and say hello to the chaps, because they're beavering away in here on some slightly less glamorous parts, but chief among which are preparing the wheels for the Manta. I don't know if I think Cal mentioned last week we've got the cast centres for the three-piece wheels for the Manta, and we've got the for the silver Manta 400 replica, and we now have the cast centres for them and the rim spinnings for them, and they've all been machined. The bolt circles and the centres have all been machined. So now we're at the fun stage of prepping for paint. So Steve's been sitting there doing the fine fettling of wheel centres for quite a while now, and then, as I say, earlier this week, Steve and all the guys were on stripping all of the charger panels back to bare metal or thereabouts, in terms of so we can do a condition assessment of everything. And as I've mentioned, that ties into what I was talking about earlier, really, with the bonnet and the boot and the damage on those. But yeah, they've certainly been busy on a bit of a varied week this week. But yeah, we'll be give it another week and a bit. I think we'll probably all be full tilt on the body prep on the Charger. We would say we've got a bit of work to do in terms of panel fit up and doing all the gapping and that side of things, and then it really will be into full speed ahead on Charger prep work in here. So yeah, that's pretty much, I think, rounded up the week. So until next time, see you again.